You know when you're watching a stock ticker, seeing all those numbers jumping up and down in a total frenzy, and you think to yourself, well, that looks exactly like my brain on a Tuesday morning? I mean, it sounds totally bizarre at first, right? Comparing the cold, raw mathematics of a financial stock exchange to something as deeply personal as our spiritual formation. But what if the exact way a market discovers the fair price of a stock is perfectly analogous to how your very own heart decides what actually matters? Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're zooming out to give you a high-level overview of an absolutely massive, genuinely fascinating framework. We are diving into a source document that builds this incredibly unlikely yet shockingly precise bridge between Wall Street trading mechanics and biblical theology. If you are encountering this for the first time, get ready, because this will absolutely shift your perspective. We're going to break down these complex themes so you can see exactly how the hidden economy of your own desires really works. All right, here's our roadmap. Section 1, Faith meets Financial Markets. Section 2, What is Auction Market Theory? Section 3, The Spirit versus Flesh Conflict. Section 4, The Inner Auction of Desires. Section 5, Diagnosing Your Spiritual Trend. And finally, Section 6, Limits of the Analogy. Let's jump right in.
Part 1. Faith meets Financial Markets. To give you the bird's-eye view here, the document we're unpacking is actually just one piece of a massive 10-paper series. And the whole premise is brilliant. It essentially treats major financial market theories as these highly disciplined, analogical lenses to examine human spiritual character. It literally takes the math and psychology of the trading floor and applies it directly to the human soul. What's so wild about this is how the author grabs diverse, totally secular concepts and uses them to decode the hidden mechanics of our own human bias and temptation. Like Tao theory is used to show how your primary spiritual trend is completely different from a momentary emotional freakout. Behavioral finance? That exposes how fear and pride distort our choices, mapping perfectly onto temptation, which honestly probably explains a few of my own terrible 401k decisions. And momentum theory shows how our spiritual habits gather directional strength over time. But today, our main focus is solely on paper number 2.
Moving right along to Section 2, what exactly is auction market theory? Let's go ahead and strip away all the heavy Wall Street jargon to find the core of today's framework, auction market theory, or AMT. Originating at the Chicago Board of Trade back in the 80s, AMT is really all about process. The absolute crucial point to grasp here is the sharp, undeniable distinction between price and value. In AMT, markets are these continuous two-way auctions. Now, a market might spike to some wild new price for a few seconds, but that's just a probe. It's an advertisement of an opportunity. Real value is only established when participants actually stick around, accept that price, and repeatedly trade at that level over time. So price is what prints right now in the moment, value is what is repeatedly accepted. Which brings us to Section 3, the spirit versus flesh conflict. Let's cross over to the other side of the bridge and define the biblical framework we're pairing with this financial theory. We have to define the fundamental conflict of human desires, like you'd see outlined in texts like Galatians and Romans. The critical thing to understand here is that we are absolutely not saying the physical human body is evil, not at all. The spirit and flesh pairing is highly symbolic. It represents two competing internal governments. The spirit is the mind aligned with God, driven by truth. The flesh, from the Greek word sarx, names a mode of living completely independent of God, driven by self-governing rebellion, pride, or fear. And these two, they are constantly, continuously bidding against each other for control over your daily choices. And that brings us to Section 4, the inner auction of desires. This is where we finally build the bridge. We're combining these two high-level concepts to show how your heart operates exactly like a continuous two-way auction on a bustling trading floor.
Let's translate those financial terms into human equivalents. Think about it. Just like a single erratic stock price isn't a market's true value, a passing intrusive thought, say a momentary urge to buy a ridiculously expensive sports car or a sudden emotional high, is just price discovery. It's a tick, a blip. It does not define your actual character. Your true character, your value discovery, only happens through enduring, repeated participation. A passing urge to be angry isn't your character until you repeatedly accept it, pull up a chair, and dwell on it.
This whole idea beautifully illustrates the process of spirit-led value migration.
Your heart might start off in a flesh-normalized area, a zone of really comfortable bad habits. But then conviction hits. Those old prices, those old habits get confronted. Through a kind of rotational conflict of testing and eventually repeated obedience to new truths, your heart discovers an entirely new accepted value area. It's an observable step-by-step migration of the soul.
Now, in market profiles, the point of control is the specific price level where the absolute most trading volume occurs. It's the fairest value. Spiritually, this asks us to identify our heart's true center of gravity. What is your actual default state? When you are dead on your feet, exhausted, or insanely stressed, do your thoughts repeatedly return to prayer, patience, and truth? Or does your internal volume cluster around rage, envy, and self-protection? Wherever you spend the bulk of your emotional energy, well, that is your spiritual point of control.
Markets are constantly moving between balance and imbalance. A balanced market is just comfortably rotating around an accepted value. But sometimes, a market becomes imbalanced, and it breaks out to find a brand new value. Spiritually speaking, inner emotional upheaval, or imbalance, is not always a bad thing. Actually, scratch that. It's often a great thing. If you've been living in a balanced state of hidden, comfortable compromise for years, the sudden instability of confession and conviction is a positive imbalance. It means you are finally breaking out of that old toxic range and migrating toward much healthier spiritual values. So how does this translate into real, practical action? Well, markets have initiative activity that forcefully drives price to new levels and responsive activity that actively defends those levels. Spiritual strength requires both of these. You need the initiative to decisively delete a bad habit entirely, like literally cutting up the credit card or deleting the app off your phone. But you also absolutely need the responsive defense to resist the urge when that temptation knocks again at the edges of your mind a week later. Ultimately, it all boils down to acceptance versus rejection. In your own internal auction, flesh dominance is fully revealed when you allow a destructive fantasy, a lingering fear, or a bitter resentment to dwell. By letting it stay, you are actively accepting trade at that price. Spiritual strength, on the flip side, is seen in the rapid, responsive rejection of that thought before it stabilizes and becomes your brand new normal. Section 5. Diagnosing your spiritual trend. Let's bring this highly abstract theory right down to earth. The source document gives us 3 wildly different real-world human case studies to show how this works as a diagnostic tool. First up is Miriam, a ministry leader. Her story is a beautiful, textbook example of true value migration. Her old internal point of control was totally anchored in public admiration and non-stop overwork. But eventually, sheer exhaustion brought conviction. Those old high prices of public success, they completely lost their appeal. She confessed, she slowed down, and her internal auction settled into a much healthier, sustainable balance centered around hidden faithfulness and rest. Her value genuinely, truly migrated.
Then, in stark contrast, we have Elias. He is suffering from what Wall Street bluntly calls a failed auction. Elias falls into a bad habit, gets hit with intense emotional remorse, and completely deletes his access. From the outside, it looks like a massive breakout. But here's the thing. Tears are not the same thing as structural change. Because he entirely lacks community and risk management, he can't sustain that new value area. His auction fails, and inevitably, just days later, he completely returns to his old, flesh-normalized value area.
Finally, there's Jonathan. And Jonathan's case is a major warning about a concept traders call divergence. Outwardly, Jonathan is a highly successful, incredibly productive speaker. His outward profile looks perfectly orderly, no red flags at all. But privately, his inner auction is secretly accepting resentment and control on a daily basis. His internal point of control is rapidly migrating towards self-importance. This is the proof that outward behavior is absolutely not an infallible map of the heart. Eventually, that invisible, internal deterioration is going to lead to a very visible collapse.
And finally, Section 6, Limits of the Analogy. As remarkably precise and fascinating as this framework is, the author is incredibly careful to establish the strict boundaries of using financial market mechanics to evaluate a human soul. We have to know the limits.
First off, the Holy Spirit is a divine person, not some impersonal, blind market force matching bids on a trading floor. Second, human growth is not a rigid, perfectly predictable mathematical formula. Real life has massive, nonlinear complexities. Third, and easily the most important, human worth is firmly grounded in grace. It can never, ever be reduced to mere performance metrics plotted on a chart.
This entire framework is meant to be a helpful diagnostic mirror for your own personal self-examination. It is not a surveillance tool for you to judge the spiritual performance metrics of the people sitting next to you. As we wrap up this high-level overview, I want to leave you with one incredibly provocative question pulled straight from the source text. I want you to ask this to your own internal trading floor. Where has compromise become fair value to me? Seriously, what negative habits, deep resentments, or lingering fears have you repeatedly accepted for so long that your heart now considers them completely normal? Think about what you are actively pricing into your life today and what it might actually take to finally reject it.